All right, we are live on YouTube and unmuted, live and in living color. That's the phrase I was looking for. I'm going to go right ahead. It's 4:34. I'm going to call to order this meeting on November 1st, 2023 of the Grand County Budget Advisory Board. We're going to start this meeting off as presented in the agenda with presentations and discussion prior to action items.
One of us choose here first.
And thank you. I'll go ahead and just do a roll call. We have here present in person Budget Advisory Board members, Chris Kaufman, myself, the chair, Gabriel Wojtek. We have Quinn Hall, Kevin Walker, Renee Baker, and Bill Winfield. Also, we have Chief Deputy Clerk Dana Van Horn here taking minutes. We have a contracted budget consultant also on the Zoom, Cody Dieter. And just walking in, we have Shaylee Bryant also. So we have a full budget advisory board here present for this meeting. So leading off for the first discussion item or presentation is the updated list of new expense requests impacting the general fund. And so I went ahead as had been requested and sort of dug down a little deeper into new expense requests that were presented throughout the process of gathering and budget presentations by department heads, totaling over a $5,000 threshold. And to be clear, these there may be other expenses that exceed that threshold, but however, if they had been approved in previous budgets, I didn't include them in the list. I prepared this list just to illustrate increases sort of unique and specific to this year. I think it's probably also important for me to note that I'm not this is for illustrative purposes. I'm not presenting this as a chopping block. I think one item that was on last week's list, and I was gonna bring this up, but I might as well bring it now. That is not on this list. Is there was $200,000 that had been included from the emergency management department for a flood warning system implementation. And I spoke with Cora Phillips, the emergency manager, and she was still pretty unsure about all the funding sources that would be involved in that the partnership that would sort of be necessary in implementing a system like that. And so we agreed at this point that it would be it doesn't necessarily make sense for the county to budget to commit for that entire cost at this point without understanding the entire picture. And so I invited her to gather all that information in full and perhaps present it before the commission during next calendar year. And if at that point, perhaps the commission could consider it and it could be included in a mid-year amendment. That seemed much more appropriate, especially for an expenditure of that size with inevitable other funding sources. So that's been removed from this list. Are there any questions about?
So I guess, I just thinking back to, the last several meetings, there are a lot of new things that I'm not seeing here. And I think that's because they were the sort of items that popped up in those little, so the line might say professional development. And maybe they're proposing to go to, 5 new conferences this year for a total cost of $30,000. But that's not going to be here because that professional development line was.
Correct. Yeah, I didn't, those consolidated lines over 5,000, I didn't include in this list. I could, I am willing to continue to compile that for the commission if that's something that would seem to be
For the workshop.
Desired for the workshop. Yeah, it wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be nice to look at some, since I think we probably aren't going to say yes to every budget request. Kind of some idea of departments have, budgets with a little bit of padding in them versus those that are more bare bones.
Yeah, I think especially in comparison with that spreadsheet that shows sort of percentage increases by department. So, maybe starting with that and seeing like, okay, which departments are seeing big increases, and then so allowing commissioners to drill down into what is really behind those increases.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good advice. Yeah, this is really important because I think that a big purpose of this meeting is to sort of garner as much feedback and advice in pulling all the topics together that the commission wants, that would be appropriate to present before the commission. Any other questions on?
There's a couple of line items. I know the very top line, I believe the water study
Yeah,
that's in the commission budget. I'm just wondering what that is. I mean, what's the purpose of another water study? Where are we going with that one? And there seems to have been so many of them lately. Is it something that somebody's requesting? Is it, what's it
Yeah, so-
wrapped around?
So it seems like several times a year we get some kind of presentation from, let's forget Mark Stilson or, one of the water
Mhm.
people, and usually they're, emphasizing that, we need more, we've got a lot of more data than we had 5 years ago, but we want still more. And so correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, but I think that it's in response to those requests from the water folks that we wanted to set aside some money so that once they came up with a more concrete proposal for the study.
And
Have something like,
then that would lead me to wonder, what's the outcome of that water study? Are we looking for something specific, or is it?
I'm trying to, I know that some of the studies have to do with, the threat of like salinity under the wetlands, there's all these salts and there's changes in the water table that can start to contaminate wells. There's another, some of the studies are trying to study the interaction between Ken's Lake and, the water it's putting into the aquifer, and then deeper, there's called the Valley Fill Aquifer and the Canyon Aquifer and connections. So that's, I'm definitely not the biggest water expert, but I think those are some of the things.
Well, trying to find the end game of, like, what if we find some of those answers, then what does that?
It kind of tells us how worried we should be about giving, committing to supply water to more and more people. If it,
So it is based around growth.
I think, well, certainly if we were sure we had enough water to be, 10 times as big as we are now, then we wouldn't be worrying about these studies.
Okay, well, we can move on from that. I just think we need to look at that real hard. I mean, we do water study after water study after water study, and sooner or later, we gotta start trusting one of them.
Yeah, well, my impression, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe, is that having that number in the budget doesn't commit us to sign.
To spend it.
Like, they'll come up, this is the exact study we want to do and this reason, and then we say, well, we've got money in the budget for that, or we could say, no, we don't have that.
It's not a commitment, okay.
Well, and the EV grant one, I think we discussed in a previous meeting too. I don't really think that's going anywhere, is it? I mean, we're still waiting for.
Yeah, I think staff is trying to gather information about the big picture of various
Right.
EV grants, so.
Okay, so if it's the same thing, it's not committing something, we can
Yeah.
move on from it. I don't.
Yeah, no, I guess I should have said that, I think for both, but neither of those are commitments.
Right.
and yeah, and I think making clear with staff that those items be earmarked, that if they are to come before, come to fruition or be considered, or there are any advanced discussions, that it be brought up in a commission meeting and fully fleshed out. Yeah, and I think that there could be some follow-up specifically on both of those items in terms of greater detail for the commission.
Yeah, transparency would be awesome on that, because I kind of have asked the same thing on the water study is, what was the key to it, so. I don't even know, even if it would be like growth water study, that would answer a million questions in my head immediately. Oh, we're trying to determine if we have enough water for our growth.
I think a lot of the studies that's the sort of overarching goal, but there's more specific goals, like, understand the relation between the aquifer and the subaquifer, or, understand the recharge rate, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I seem to recall specifically too, that there was a request, or, there was a scientist that suggested that, further modeling was needed, that there was some mathematical modeling perhaps that was needed to be dedicated to then allow for the implementation of, well monitoring systems. I think that there was something having to do with that. A
We can
process.
delve into it deeper.
Okay.
I don't wanna get bogged down, and I'm not trying to bog us down at any rate, so.
No, that's what we're here for sure.
Further down, there's one that I was also curious about. I mean, right here, the Trails Master Plan.
Mhm.
I mean, I use trails, maybe not as much as Jacques, but definitely the hiking trails and stuff around, but I mean, that GCAT or Active Trails and Transportation.
Yeah.
I've only been around since 19 and now, I mean, when was the last master plan done? And
I think it was 2011.
so it has been quite a while. Okay, perfect. Scroll on. That's,
And that is a split between I guess the proposal is actually $120,000 for that, for said update, and that would be half of that. Just for
and who's the other half?
city.
Oh, the city is, okay.
But I do, I mean, I think we're different. I agree, it's time for an update, but I'm not sure that the update has to cost $120,000.
Right, that was pretty costly.
So I
You might have seen my
I want
eyebrows
to
raised.
delve into that one a little bit more.
Yeah.
before we-
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then, I don't think this is the place to bring it, all of it up, but at some point, I think we need to look at the overall budget for that department. I mean, clearly, I think even with the email that we got recently, we need to get a feel for just what's going on with that department. I mean, who's got control of the schedule, where are they going? I think some of that was raised questions from San Juan County last week, so.
And my understanding is that according to our staff, nothing has happened in San Juan County. They think San Juan County got confused. But
Be interesting to see just what their schedule is and where they're going. I mean, guys are past the San Juan County, so, you know, there's a lot of territory around here. You don't have to go very far to get into San Juan. So,
Again, oh, ask me afterwards, I can tell you more. I don't want
Yeah.
to put more time.
Yeah.
Do you think Gabe had it as kind of a structure for the workshops to go over?
yeah,
I think, yeah, in previous budget advisory board meetings, there were actually department heads for economic development and Grand County Active Trails and Transportation were brought in to offer background detail and presentation associated with a wider conversation about TRT allocations.
okay.
And I think that you know, that could be a worthy option as well.
Yeah.
Any other specific items to, I think, so, yeah, so just to sum up, this list can be further fleshed out, with some of those consolidated lines of new expenditures for commission consideration, and that I will follow up with. I did meet with, Cody today, Cody McKinney, our fleet, our fleet manager, because I've been curious for some time about, you know, when the enterprise lease program is gonna start sort of paying dividends, so to speak, with regards to overall costs. And he gave a pretty good explanation that, you know, there weren't a lot of vehicles available in year one, so that delayed when we actually acquired a lot of the vehicles, which it was year 3 or year 2, I should say, which I think was, can't remember if that was this, that would constitute this year.
22.
And so we're basically, it looks like next year, we're gonna start sort of trading vehicles back in, and the way he explained it is that equity that we might have built up in a trade back into the system will ultimately serve to reduce the cost of the vehicle that replaces it in a department, and thus reducing the monthly payment for those leased vehicles. And that's sort of the model that he's presenting. So as he describes it, you know, starting probably for next budget season, we should be seeing some of those lease payments reducing. Of course, these, to be very clear, these are new vehicles being requested by departments. But I thought that would be worthy of bringing up. The next item that we have here on the agenda is an updated breakdown of budget impacts associated with new positions, reclassifications, and a cost of living adjustment. This out here, wish we could get this thing all on the screen. That's too small, of course. Renee, do you, is there
Sure.
anything you want to talk about with regards to this?
So I did no adjustments from the proposed, proposal that I gave, last week. I did do a breakdown on the new positions of the total cost of the COLA that's calculated into those positions. So that totals about 18,000. And if you remember, most of those positions were in the general fund, except for one, which was grant, from, trails. And so,
And can I, just to clarify, so this 134, and this line, that includes 2,887.89, okay.
it does, yep. So that total employee cost is the proposed cost of, salary and benefits. And no changes in the proposals from last meeting.
And we still have, there's a figure here for, countywide 3.2% COLA, which is equal to the Social Security Administration figure for next year. That's totaling $450,999.51,
Correct.
accounting for all of the new positions included, correct?
Correct, and all of the reclassified positions, so those would be, the COLA includes them at the higher grade, if that's what's proposed. Additionally, I should have taken off the proposal for the public safety URS pickups. Sheriff Wiggins has pulled that proposal for this year, pending some legislation changes. And we're still working on some modifications for the pay for performance proposal. So I think we'll see that go down a little bit.
And so that COLA number is still up for a decision, correct?
Correct, that would be a commission decision on a COLA. And if you think it would be helpful, I could have a couple different figures so we could see what that would look like in a workshop for the commission.
And then just correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, but I think for, going back 7 or 10 years, maybe county often did not do a COLA. Some of our salaries are getting too low. We did a big salary adjustment, and then the discussion was, well, maybe we should, make small adjustments every year instead of waiting 5 years and doing big ones.
Sure, I do have it right on my desktop, and I wish I brought my computer, but I do have a breakdown of each year and what COLA was approved.
Mhm.
And for the most part, over the last 12 years, they were somewhat low. Always trying to match inflation. There was a couple years without a COLA, 2 or 3 maybe, and then in 18 we had to do a big catch up with the salary survey to get the salaries up to kind of that standard. And then last year, with inflation being so high, it was an 8.7% COLA.
8.7, right?
8.7,
Right.
correct.
Okay, so the last 3 or 4 years, we've just done whatever Social Security.
Yeah, matching the Social Security.
But we're not obligated to do any of that, and so we have to decide each year, whether we want to do the full thing or less or nothing.
I seem to recall a year as well where the COLA was implemented halfway through the year retroactively.
That was 2018.
That was 18.
Mhm.
Interesting.
And so, I think at least in the, the recent commission discussions that I've been a part of, the argument that seems to carry the day is we should just, unless something really unusual is happening, just do the COLA, because that, then we keep pace with inflation. And I'm not endorsing that, but I'm just saying that in past discussions, that point of view seems to carry the day.
Chris Berg would always say that if you're not keeping up with inflation, then everyone's getting a pay cut.
Which you might want to do if the budget's light.
And then, I just want to summarize here, because there isn't a bottom line offered in this chart, but, the overall impact of all of these, employee costs being proposed as new positions is $928,000. And that includes $18,000 of a COLA that could or could not be, sort of granted. And the overall impact of the reclassifications would be 120,000.
So on the new positions that are being asked, we're asking for the salary plus a COLA before there's even a position.
Right.
Cause I guess the COLA just changes the grade and step chart.
Yeah, the COLA just changes the grade and step chart, so. So when we apply a COLA, it's applied countywide on the grade and step chart. Yeah.
Okay.
I still think it would be good, Renee, to present the new positions, like their total employee cost without the COLA,
Okay.
because it just is a separate decision, I think, you know,
No, that's.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I guess I'm kind of, as she's raised it, they're not understanding why if we're hiring somebody into a new position, why are they then also putting a COLA on top of it? Why? I mean, why isn't that COLA the next year's time when they have had a year of?
I think we're getting confused with like merit increases and COLA. So COLA is always just applied at the beginning of the year to the grade and step chart. Anybody coming in, even if it was just a vacant position, would be placed on that grade and step chart with the approved COLA amount, and then have to work through our merit program.
And it gets a little, I mean, in the weeds, I know, but for me, it's like, if the COLA gets approved, then the decision to approve new employee positions should include the COLA when the commission is actually looking at the cost. If it's not approved, then they shouldn't look at it. That's where it gets a little in the weeds of like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually gonna disagree with Gabe, because
Yeah, it's like, it
I
gets
think
in the weeds
judging
of
from
like,
past meetings, I think it's fairly likely that we're gonna
Right.
do the COLA or something close to it. And so I'd rather see the new position figures with the
Right.
COLA
I-
figured in.
yeah.
But I don't think it's so likely that we're gonna approve every single new position.
So I think if it's pretty likely that, and I think they should approve the COLA, personal opinion, but, if they do, then I would wanna see the actual impact to 2024, which would include the COLA. Would be my thought. It's nice to know that it's already in there, maybe that should be like a asterisk, but
Very well. It seems like I'm outnumbered in that. Carry on with your.
We'll do both.
perfect, well, if it is.
No, you both, this question of which one comes first.
Sure, yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments with regards to that item?
I will note that I will have a way to rank for the commissioners to rank their new position and reclassification requests. And then, I believe that on the workshop that's proposed for the 7th, we'll hit these, and then you can do the ranking, throughout the workshop process, and we can come back to discussion on the reclassifications and on the new positions if needed.
So I
So the
feel like,
ranking is gonna be like some spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I feel like even, I mean, our commissioners are spread out, so then doing so much, like, how in any way, like, do you have a say on prioritizing of like, this department is so low on people that they really need it? I mean, because I think there's probably things that you see ranking wise, like, would that be helpful to the commission to know like what her priority levels would be? Or like that's a hard one for me. It's like.
Well, I think it's also, I mean, the other thing you could do is have each department give a presentation, but that would take a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, really
And
long
it would
time,
be
yeah.
uneven,
Right.
because I think some departments.
Some
have
people are
more
very
energetic.
eloquent. Some people are like, we just need them.
So
They were good.
I don't think it's a perfect solution, but I thought Renee gave a very good and fair summary when we listened to it, a week or two ago. And I think also the fact that we're not gonna just then instantly rank them right there, we're gonna like do our homework. And so there'll be a week for people to ask or discuss or,
It's really hard. I'm sorry.
Then I
Sorry,
think, I'm not sure, but it seemed like she had it totaled by department, right? This
We
is
did,
gonna
yeah.
be a X dollar amount total for new position.
The presentation was really thorough, I just.
Yeah,
so-
well, that's what I would want to see at the workshop, I
Yeah.
guess, is what I was trying to communicate, that we have the by department, what that effect is gonna be.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next item? All right, so the next item is a discussion regarding a budgeted draw from the fund balance. So a basic, is that the right? Oh, no, okay, yeah. So a basic introduction to this idea is, it is typical, it has been customary and it has been proven to be, uh, a viable way to budget in Grand County. And, I don't actually have any insight as to whether this is common practice across other government budgeting systems. But to actually, budget to draw from the fund balance, which is, and is not something that is logical when
So
you're
so
budgeting.
we're budgeting in the red.
We're budgeting in the red, yeah, budgeting to pull out of the bank to make the budget, to balance the budget at the end of the year. And this is done because there's typically an underspending that happens, that is in practice shown to be true. And it has been customary in recent years for the budget to be left up to $800,000 in the red. Because of some analysis that has been done regarding what has been budgeted at the beginning of the year and what ends up getting spent by the end of the year. And so I was able to pull out a bunch of numbers specific to salaries, benefits, on-call pay, and overtime, pertaining dating back to 2018 through this partial year that we're in now, that reflects that beginning budget. That beginning budget line, say in 2022, there was 14 million budget, 13,781 budgeted at the beginning of the year for salary, benefits, overtime, and on-call pay. And what was ended up spent due to not being fully staffed across the county was 12,387,841, which makes a difference of $1,625,940. So it starts to make sense why we would budget in the red, because there's this sort of just natural.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding, is that second to last row is dollar figures under difference. That's the amount that we might be willing to be in the red, because those are the amounts that typically we underspend our budget.
This is the historical record of what we've underspent just in salary, benefits, and overtime and on-call pay. And looking at like the projections for this year, for example, in across the departments outside of salary, benefits, and on-call pay, it does, I don't think that there's certainly other things that would lead us to, be over or even be under. But it does look like the compensation really does make up the bulk of that difference. And I think this, I have a feeling that this amount here, this anomaly here in 2018 reflects directly back to what we had just talked about with regards to a mid-year COLA implementation. And that's why our actuals came out.
That's what Chris talked about last year, was that's why that was so close, is because of that mid-year COLA.
Yeah. And so,
My question would be then, at the final number, for 2022, there's the 12,387,000.
that's the the final number. Yep.
The final number.
Yep.
Was that number in the red? Where were those numbers at the end of the year? And
No, so we budgeted 14, but we spent 12.
Yeah,
correct.
we were under
And
budget.
did we have to pull out of, or where it was?
We were under budget, not over.
Well, yeah, you were
Right.
clearly under budget, but we had. Okay, yeah,
But Chris did, he spent a pretty good amount of time last year talking about the 800,000 number, if it was like the goal.
And so I went ahead, when I completed this, I thought it would also be useful. And then I just want to make sure to point out here that these year-to-date figures, these are 2023 actuals, and this budgeted number, this is the actual beginning budget of 23 in this column. And this here is 83% of this budgeted number. That's 10 out of 12 months. And so that's what this 2023 year-to-date column represents. I just wanted to make sure to point that out.
So the middle line, it seems to show our spending on salary going down in 2023, but that's not true. That's just because the year's not over yet.
Right, exactly.
And have you projected what it would be if we continue on the same path? I'm just curious how steep the increase is on salaries.
Oh, sure. I can maybe try and clear that up. I think the trend will kind of stay the same. There's nothing big expected to happen in November or December in salaries or benefits.
So it's gonna end up being what, if the trend's the same, like 14 million actuals?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I should have that number available.
We can
And
calculate that.
I wanted to open up Cassell and quick get that number, and I wish I could say it was that easy to derive.
Sure, we'd have to project out the next the next four
I mean, can
payrolls.
we just multiply by,
Yeah.
10 12ths or something?
Certain, yeah.
12 tenths?
Right, because this is just a raw linear kind of,
Okay,
Yeah.
and so this is 10 months then, at that number, or is it 9 months?
10 months, yeah, 83%.
Okay, so.
I get 13,856.
Thank you.
If I multiply by 1.13 or 1.12, if we're at 88% there.
80.
Am I doing that right?
Yeah.
Kevin?
Kevin,
Wait, I don't understand where you got the math, what?
I think it's like you should multiply by 1.2. Because,
80%, 88%.
I thought it was 88%.
I used 83,
Divide-
83,
Oh, 83.
83 in the
yeah,
third.
that,
83. Okay.
if you divide by 0.83, which is the same as multiplying by 1.2.
But yeah, it is, I think this exercise is actually valuable to see, not only what the budgeted expense for compensation has been in the general fund, it's like,
So this major discrepancy happened because like positions don't get filled and like, is that
Yeah,
where that comes from?
positions will be open for time.
and so, since after I prepared this, I thought it would always be, I thought it would also be useful for this discussion because it is customary for this board to make a recommendation about what the budgeted draw from the fund balance might be. And so I pulled the same numbers for compensation for the 2024 tentative budget. And to be clear, these include all of the proposed new positions and reclassifications. And so, in the, as we see here, where we kind of are vacillating here between as low as 88% and as high as 95%. I'm not really going to use this number here because I think it's kind of anomalous because of what happened that year. But, and I just offered, I went as low as 95%. So if we were to budget in the red, or if we were to count on there being 95% underspending in compensation, that would amount to 756,000, with all the proposed compensation there. So
That's good.
So to make sure I understand then, you're suggesting that, so, currently if we were to say yes to everything, on paper will be roughly 1.9 million in the red. And you're suggesting we might want to bring that down to 750,000 in the red if we didn't want to actually take anything out of fund balance.
I think what he is suggesting is more like, so you start the budget knowing that you're gonna be under budget. And so regardless of starting the 1.5 million versus the 95, it's just basically saying, we're gonna guesstimate, we're gonna be roughly 800,000 under what we're budgeting for compensation. And we are supposed to recommend that number as the budget advisory board.
and I can follow. I can follow up too.
Yeah.
So right now, as we'll see in the tentative budget, we're approximately 2 million. It's being proposed 2 million in the red.
Okay.
And so,
Which is-
the
2
committee,
million's too high, 750 would be just about right. That's that much.
through the budgeting process, the commission we want to get to a balanced budget by trimming that 2 million down. And so it could be this board's recommendation that, that this be the natural cushion that be accounted for, such that 2 million in the red wouldn't have to be trimmed all the way down to 0, but rather would be trimmed from 2 million to 750.
Okay, that's what I
How
was
does
trying to
this,
say.
how
Sorry.
does this, sorry,
I think
how
you
does
guys
this
are-
hurt us? One way or another, like if we were to budget 2 million versus 800 versus 0, how does this hurt us with accounting?
So I
we
think,
stay fully staffed all year, we don't have this cushion. And then we have to draw from the fund balance at the end of 24.
Far more the other, you know,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of savings in the fund balance and in capital accounts. And if we spent, you know, more than this, then those numbers will probably decrease a little. So
Okay, yeah.
the thing that, you know, we always want to be careful about is that when the budget is increasing with expenses that are gonna occur every year, that if you get too far out ahead, then you'll start eating up your fund balances pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If you, you know, but we've already taken out the sort of one-time capital expenses and said, hey, we're gonna use money in the bank for that, and so we're not even putting those in as reoccurring expenses, even though we do have capital expenses every year, so. And I have a question for you, Gabe.
Please.
I understand that compensation is where the majority of this is coming from, but were you able to look at non-compensation? Cause
I
there's gonna
didn't.
be there's gonna be some padding in there for sure too.
The only thing I went through the process of filling out end of year projections for this year. And what I noticed is that from department to department, everyone was pretty well, like, there wasn't a lot of departments that were at 75%, say. Everyone was pretty close in the 90, sort of in the 90s.
this
And-
90s on the non-compensation or compensation?
Including, with both accounted
Okay.
for. So I kind of took that to mean that it's not nearly as significant as this number, but I think you're certainly right, so this could be undershooting a little bit, for example, based on, my perspective is based on what's happened historically as far as this vacillation, especially considering we've acknowledged openly that we think that we're as staffed up as we have been for as long as anyone can remember, and the fact that we're still only 94% year to date. Admittedly, I'm the one who prepared these numbers and I chose these percentages to be included, but I tend to think that 95% it feels safe to me. It doesn't feel, I think going under that would make, I don't know how much I would support that recommendation.
The other thing that this doesn't include is any historical trend that there might be in being how far we're off on revenue projections, because we're just looking at budgeted expenses versus actual expenses. And I don't know what that would look like.
We'll get into that in the workshop, will we not, the projections? And
What projection the commission decides to choose, certainly that'll be at the commission's discretion.
But looking back in time and saying, this is what we thought we would take in revenue, and
Oh, I
this is what
see.
we actually did.
Correct.
And I don't know what it is for a lot of, I know for quite a few years, we brought in more than we thought we would, and that's what led to putting money in the bank at the end of the year. One of the things,
Sure.
in addition to underspending.
Hmm.
Ask a quick off-topic question, kind of off-topic. What does Grand County do with their investments or money in their savings?
Chris?
Chris?
That's me. We're limited by the Money Management Act in Utah, so public funds in Utah are limited in how they can be invested.
I know that part only just because I keep getting asked by other counties to handle their investments. I just always wondered what Grand County does.
Yeah, well, the vast majority of it is in PTIF because their return is pretty great. It's 100% liquid, and so it's hard to get that anywhere else. We do have another investment with Zion's Capital Advisors, which is more, they've picked out specific things bonds that we purchased, and they can tend to get a little bit higher rate than PTIF, but they tend to be out a little bit further. It's not as liquid, so.
And PTIF is the Public Treasurer Investment Fund. So I guess I would, we kind of wanna, I don't know how it's customary for this body to include a specific recommendation in the motion.
So we need a motion.
It could be, not at this time, but I think it might be worth sort of a straw poll or some, reaching some sort of majority opinion on what's, if the recommendation for the tentative budget would be also to include a budgeted draw from the fund balance no greater than X amount. I would take a straw poll who would support a draw from the fund balance no greater than $750,000.
And this is using which, sales tax projections, because that has a big effect on it. Like using the conservative one or?
What's right now in the tentative budget is are the 0% growth projections.
So every single tax is 0% growth?
Correct.
Seems kind of crude.
I think that when you asked him, I guess it was actually Chris asked him to lump all of those Codium saying into one graph. We showed a somewhat negative trend for next year, did we not? Or at least through this year? So, I guess where I'm going with it is I would want to limit a number somewhere. For your straw poll, I'm not really in favor of 2 million. I certainly can be a lot warmer to 750,000. And figuring out how to make that work, making a recommendation to the other commissioners is what we're asking for, right?
Yeah.
I guess the reason I was asking is, we don't know exactly what, we don't know exactly what we're gonna spend. And we definitely don't know exactly what sales taxes are gonna do. And so, and if we're making very pessimistic assumptions about sales taxes, that increases the chance that, our budget might be smaller than it needs to be, that will actually end up increasing the fund balance after all is said and done. I think if our fund balance are really low and, in danger of going down to zero, we definitely want to avoid, even a small chance of a dip in our fund balance, and I'm including the capital things. But in fact, it's the opposite, our fund balance is at, very, correct me if I'm wrong, but it really shot up starting around 2020. And so we've got, quite a lot of padding in the bank account, which means we don't have to be quite as risk averse. And we could be a little bit more optimistic about sales tax, which I'm not sure what optimistic is. Maybe 0% is optimistic.
Well, and I guess we're also discussing on a larger scale here, future priorities, I guess it was, that Mallory put together, and there's discussions of a public safety building, there's discussions of a new building here, and those are gonna come from that fund balance, correct? A portion of those, and so to be too willing to throw it all out there now and to reduce that fund balance by a couple of $1 million every year, why I think we would have to put some of those priorities to bed and say that we're spending them now rather than.
Yeah, well, I was thinking rather than a couple of $1 million or maybe a couple of 100,000, but something much less than that.
Yeah.
Which
Lower
is
than
small
750.
compared to the overall fund balance.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing to remember is that even though we budget in the red, we don't come out even. We've come out even, putting money in the bank every year that I've been on the budget committee and prior to that for several years. So
So I'm saying,
if we took the 800,000, that hasn't been, we've saved that much and then some. Although whether that's coming from revenue projections that were too low, it's hard to pull that out. We can't with.
Some of it came from the grants and from the COVID years, and so you can't count that all as
Yeah, but that's,
excess money that we received from sales tax and TRT and the others, so.
right.
I do feel like with us coming out of like COVID and really trying to figure out what our new normal is, I think a good bet is between 750 and 800 is just to really determine what is this next year, are we gonna get, is our revenue increase gonna go up? Cost of inflation is coming back down, so sales tax was greatly affected by inflation this last year, even though we weren't necessarily busier, everything costs more. So, I feel like maybe we need one more year under our belts of really before we try to trim that down. I think it needs to be trimmed, Kevin, I really do, but I think worry about us trimming it too much, that 750 number. Were you saying you wanted to go down a couple $100,000?
No, I'm not, I was, I guess what I'm saying is that 750 could be
Oh,
high.
higher? Okay.
Yeah, I was,
You're trying to go a little bit bigger buffer?
yeah,
I mean,
because we're not, because we have so much money in the bank, we can, we don't have to be quite as conservative.
Right.
It's like, if you're driving, if you're tailgating someone, then you need to be hypersensitive that they slow down.
Right.
And if you're, just like,
more
a quarter mile behind them, you don't have to react,
Well, and at the end of the year, if we don't spend it, it goes back into the general fund.
It never comes out.
But like theoretically, that still is there to then put in the budget for the next year, but it's money we're not making in investments and things, because it's actually pulled out of all that, right? Is that
well, it's,
how it works?
No. Never comes out unless we go over the projections, and we're saying that we're gonna project more, so we'll actually be on the underside. So.
Okay.
But at least that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but. It's not gonna come out and then go back
Right, I've
in.
never run a government, obviously.
It's not that I'm trying to.
my understanding, again, just,
Yeah,
so we have like savings, analogous to like, a person, my personal saving, maybe my income is hard to predict each year, and some years I make a very low amount, some years I make a really high amount. And I've got to decide, what I'm gonna, my ongoing expenses are. And if I don't have much money in the bank, then I better plan on it, next year being a low year, because otherwise I'm in trouble.
Right.
But if I do have a lot of money in the bank, I just need to plan, think about what's the average of the next few years, because if I have a low year, then, just leads to a fluctuation in my bank balance, but I'm not getting into trouble like that. So I think, so I think for every, as Chris was pointing out, in past years, we've always made pretty conservative assumptions, and we've ended up adding money to the bank, rather than withdrawing it from the savings account. And I'm just pointing out that if we did have to draw a little bit, not millions of dollars, but maybe a few $100,000 from our, what's, I don't know what it is, 8 or 9 million, that's fund balance plus capital accounts.
Yeah, I'm still pulling that together and I'll have that ready for the commission.
Yes.
That's right.
So if that were to go down 3% or, that's not the end of the world. And next year we would have, we're not conservative enough last year, there'll be a message for next year to make the adjustment so that the ongoing expenses, especially the salaries, are in line with what, our ongoing.
So I would propose that we, maybe agree, at least in the majority, that we recommend a draw from the fund balance no greater than 800,000, just to keep with convention. Or just leave that out of the recommendation and let the commission itself. That would seem to be, I don't see why we necessarily would have to include that in the motion.
I'm comfortable with 800,000.
As I am.
I'm fine with that too, but I just do think that this can't be decoupled from whether we're being conservative or realistic or optimistic about sales taxes.
Yeah.
And that it's, intimately tied to that.
Okay. Good discussion. Thank you all.
It's gonna be a good sales tax year.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen again. The next topic is I just wanted to give an overview of the November budget workshop schedule for the commission. The tentative budget topics that I want to touch on, and then just garner any feedback that you all might have. If there's anything that you see that's missing, because I'm gonna have to turn around really quick and get an agenda, get a packet item together here in the next couple of days. And I appreciate all of y'all's feedback in general. This is the general framework that I have in mind. A first meeting where I just give a sort of a quick presentation with some highlights of the tentative budget that we would recommend today. Yes, I believe so. I think we'll need not 2:30 for sure. These would be, the November 7th and November 28th would likely be at 2 p.m. It's looking like November 13th, not the week of, but actually November 13th at 9 a.m. is shaping up to be the likely date for the second workshop. But yeah, have Cody come in again and discuss revenue projection methodologies and invite some discussion, about whether, you know, and the commission can discuss amongst themselves about, you know, what sort of, conservative, mid or otherwise, or aggressive or otherwise type of, projection that, you know, and that will obviously have, you know, have a significant effect on the tentative budget. So I can provide scenarios about what those things will do, what those different decisions will do. And then Renee will, tee up the presentation on new positions, reclassifications, and cost of living adjustments. This second meeting, will be really focused on some of the, well, first it'll be an overview of fund balances. I think that's an important discussion, to be aligned with, some of these revenue allocations where there are fund balances that, you know, that might be different than in previous years. And so just seeing the state of affairs on those fund balances, and then just kind of really, focusing on TRT in particular, and how that relates to a few departments and the general fund, as a whole. And the final meeting, I put this, the airport budget picture. I think that I still have questions that I really need to figure out regarding the airport budget picture. I was alerted, there was a suggestion by the previous budget officer in last year's budget meetings that now without CARES Act funding and without this funding source, now that all of a sudden there's gonna be $1 million coming out of the general fund that hadn't been sort of, you know, thought of in the same way. And as it stands, I'm having a hard time figuring out exactly what they were referencing at that time.
I had that question in mind for today's meeting. I was like, where is that? Where have we had any? So, yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's an important topic that I think that the commission
And that $1 million is just like maintenance and operation at the airport, I think.
Yeah,
That was my impression, because for the last few years, the CARES Act funding, while we got money in 2020 and a little bit more in 2021 for the county, the small regional airports were on like a continual CARES Act appropriation that was covering all operations and maintenance at the airport. And that is going away. It's definitely something we need to be aware of and deal with.
So if we're gonna look for that in the budget, we're not gonna see it in airport expenditures. What we're gonna see is suddenly that we were having $1 million a year as a CARES Act
Drop in
funding,
revenue.
and that's gonna stop.
That's significant.
And I'm not sure what the million, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but there was definitely CARES Act money was injected into small regional airports for much longer than it was counties in general.
but we would also talk about capital projects in this meeting, and I think that ties into airport improvement projects and how much the commission is interested in supporting those projects, which carry a considerable local match, and sort of just a general conversation, wider ranging conversation about the commission's intents and desires for the airport moving forward.
But just to be clear, there's no revenue in our current 2024 budget for the airport from those kinds of sources.
And that's what that's what I was suggesting is like, I'm actually having a hard time figuring out exactly what if we were slated to receive that revenue in 2023, where exactly that is. There was some budgeted, and yeah, I still have some questions, and I'm not prepared to talk about it right now, but
And it's around the CARES Act, you say?
right, yeah.
But the point is, we're not anticipating suddenly to have, you know, instead of a $2 million deficit in our budget to go to 3, because we don't have any of that money that budgeted for revenue. So we're currently bearing the whole airport burden with the 24 budget.
That's my understanding, yeah. Whether that's $1 million or not, I'm not really sure at this point.
Yeah.
I see.
And then we'll talk about calendar year budget. So how this year's rounding out. By then we'll have one more month of receipts, which will be useful in seeing what the picture is going to be looking like. And I'll present amendments that we'll need to tie up and close out our budget for this year, because we'll have to have hearings for both the proposed 24 budget as well as the 23 amendments end of year. And then, just revisit topics from previous workshops that I'm sure that there's going to be some follow-up and requests for more information regarding things that are brought up in the previous 2 meetings. Any specific holes that you see or desires?
Oh, really good job.
Thanks. Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
it's fun sometimes.
I also, I forgot to say, I thought your previous slide with all the, you know, the trends and the compensation, that was really good to see, so
Yeah.
thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
That helped.
Oh, that I have them in action items. We did action, I set action items in the agenda after presentation.
Sorry, I don't have a copy of it with me.
No problem at all. Okay, well, that's the last presentation discussion item I had, and so we are ready to move into action items. First off, we have approval of budget advisory board minutes for October 26th, 2023, prepared by the wonderful Dana Van Horn. I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes for that meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion by Winfield, a second by Brian. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. And then finally, recommendation to forward a tentative 2024 budget for consideration by the Grand County Commission. You know, I don't know how much it's worth opening up these slides and scrolling through for the sake of the public. They are published in the agenda packet for anyone's review. I did include a sort of a higher level, I called it a fund level, though it's even, it gives even more detail than it includes all the categories within each fund.
That was super informative. That was good.
Okay, and then there's this one as well, which I'm happy to say, typically this sort of super detailed tentative budget hasn't always included the comments that I add in throughout this process. And so I'm really happy that those comments are there. I think it just is more information. And in the past, it just seems like these comments were used more internally, and I don't think of them as internal comments
Yeah,
necessarily.
that's great.
And so I would, you know, just a couple things. I talked about that 200,000 in expense for the flood warning system being removed from this tentative budget. All of the sales and use tax revenue projections are set for 0% growth relative to the budget consultant's end of year projections. And certainly that could be adjusted with one more month of receipts if that would inevitably adjust what the end of year projection would be. One other, I'm sure that there are a lot of items, and I tried my best to scour through, and if there are any big changes that I've made after presenting items. One thing that I did want to make sure to point out is that in Fund 16. Oh, this one is only the general fund, isn't it? Oh, no, is it? Yeah. It looks like this by department is only the general fund. Okay, that's good to know. I'm gonna want to break that out and include all the funds in this one. My apologies. I can go back into that other form and go down to, so the detail isn't there, but in this economic development department, as you can see, that's currently the proposed tentative is in the red, so there will need to be trimming in there. And again, I think it's important to recognize that this tentative budget includes, you know, all the presentations that we received and all the expense requests. You know, if there was enough information for them to make that request, we included it in here. So cuts are inevitable, especially for funds like 16. And I think that's, that should be noted for funds that appear to be out of balance in this tentative budget. One thing I wanted to mention in particular, which is why I brought it up, the Old Spanish Trail Arena director provided me a list of expense requests associated with the county fair event. And in this year, there was $50,000 in tourism promotion TRT funds contributed towards the county fair. And the OSTA director is proposing $110,000 of those funds allocated towards the county fair out of the tourism promotion expense line. So this went, and that had been set at 50 because I hadn't received her request yet. And so this went up by that merit alone by 60,000, putting this, from 50,000 in the red to 112,000 in the red. I think that's, any questions or sort of general comments about this tentative?
You are gonna get all of the funds into the agenda, or we'll have access to them, you say?
The detailed one definitely will, yep,
Okay.
absolutely. And I can, yeah, I mean, the general fund is the big one, so it should be relatively, easy to get the rest tied up. So, seeing no other questions and comments at this time, I'm just gonna go ahead and recite the motion. So I would entertain a motion to recommend that the county commission adopt the presented tentative 2024 budget in November workshop sessions, such that the budgeted draw from the fund balance is no greater than $800,000. This may be accomplished through a combination of actions not limited to reducing the cost of living adjustment percentage, not granting new positions and reclassifications, or adjusting revenue projections, or any number of other department cuts that could be proposed or demanded.
So moved.
Motion by Walker, second by Winfield. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Appreciate all of your time. I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 5:36 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yeah, everyone on the girls' side is orange.
Here's the list.
From my, obviously.
Here's the list that I get from the money on who to use.
It's so crazy, like San Juan just asked me if I would manage their money.